Hi guys, welcome back to the Christian Nerds Unite podcast. Today, we're going to talk all about filmmaking and storytelling, and we'll get to that right after this. Can you believe the year is already half over? Well, it's time for me to review my goals. Have you reviewed yours? Wait, you don't have any goals? You know what? It's never too late. The Goal Process 101 ebook has helped me clarify the best and most achievable goals. Plus, it helped me set a plan in place to accomplish them. I mean, this podcast is just one of the results of the Goal Process 101 ebook. Check it out at christiannerdsunite.com/goals. It's never too late to start. And now, back to the show. Before we get started, let's start with some scripture. Matthew 13:33-35. He told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like leaven, that a woman took and hid in 3 measures of flour, till it was all leavened. All these things Jesus said to the crowds in parables. Indeed, he said nothing to them without a parable. This was to fulfill what was spoken by the prophet. I will open my mouth in parables. I will utter what has been hidden since the foundation of the world. And Matthew 13:10-13. Then the disciples came and said to him, Why do you speak to them in parables? And he answered them, To you it has been given to know the secrets of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been given. For to the one who has, more will be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. This is why I speak to them in parables, because seeing they do not see, and hearing they do not hear, nor do they understand. Now, a lot of us know that Jesus taught in stories and parables all the time. Well, today, we use stories to help communicate ideas. I have a good friend who always has a story when he wants to explain something to me, especially when he's trying to convince me of some idea he has. He always starts with, just imagine, and then he tells me this story of the way things could be if everything went right. Stories help children remember ideas. It helps us to internalize things better. It gives us a better picture of what the future could be like in daily life. We use stories all the time. Even commercials. The best commercials use stories to tell us why we should buy a product. Storytelling is a powerful, powerful medium, and it's used all the time, all around us. And if you're not using it to share the gospel, I think you might be missing out. So I want to share some things about storytelling and about filmmaking. I've actually done a couple of short films that I've directed, helped write. I directed them, put the cast and crew together, some crazy stuff. And it was really, really fun. Took them through film festivals. It was quite a ride. I've also helped produce a feature documentary about a tornado that came through Moore, Oklahoma in 2013. And we followed 4 different individuals and their faith journey during this time after the tornado. You know, how the tornado affected their faith journey. And it was a phenomenal adventure to go through and tell those stories. Well, filmmaking is all about storytelling, and Christian filmmaking should be even more so. Now, what makes something a Christian film? This is a question that I get asked all the time. And because I'm in, the industry, I have been in the industry. And I ask this to other filmmakers as well. What exactly makes something a Christian film? Is that a genre? Well, not exactly, because you could have a Christian science fiction movie, or a Christian romance, or a Christian drama, or a Christian comedy. This is more of an adjective, and it's less of a genre. But we kind of have this picture of what we think, this is what all Christian films are today, because we're starting to see some films that are blatantly Christian and are marketed specifically to a Christian audience. Now, so what makes something a Christian film? Is it the content and the subject matter? I definitely think it can be, but I don't think that's all it is. Now, Bible stories, we see movies like The Passion of the Christ, which did phenomenally well in theaters. It is a rated R Christian film about the Passion of Christ, the last days of Christ on earth before he was crucified, and before the resurrection. It's an amazing film. It is so, so well done. Then we have, stories like The Chosen. It's not exactly a film. It's more of a TV show, and it's being produced and developed and provided in a different way than a lot of films and TV shows have been done in the past. So it's a little different model, but The Chosen is, once again, it's a Bible story. It takes liberties a bit, and it's more about those people who are around Jesus and what might have happened while Jesus was there. It's a fascinating look at the life of the people in Jesus' time. Rock solid show, super phenomenally well done as well. Then we have movies that are more theological or more based on Christian living. They're very, very upfront Christian themed. Things like God's Not Dead, which did very well in theaters. It has a direct gospel presentation. We actually see someone pray a sinner's prayer in these kind of movies. They are definitely aimed at the Christian market very directly. And at some time, they kind of try to be evangelical in some way. Most of the time, I don't know that they always succeed in being that exact fit. Then there are those Christian living kind of movies where it's like, here is a problem that a lot of Christians deal with, and we want to deal with it in a Christian way. So that would be movies like something like Fireproof, if you remember that film from several years ago. Looking at a man who's basically addicted to porn and how he deals with that, and how he comes back to a loving relationship with his wife, and it's all from a Christian perspective. Then we have movies that just kind of have a faith theme or a moral story. And these are not, like I said, they're not the Christian living. Sometimes they're more fantasy. So these would be things like, a straight allegory, like Narnia, the Narnia movies, the Narnia books. They are literally allegories. Aslan is clearly a Jesus analog in those books and movies. There's no question about it. C.S. Lewis even says that it is. Then we have movies that are more the good versus evil, where we see good prevail every time. So these might be movies like The Lord of the Rings, books like The Lord of the Rings. They're not direct allegories. J.R.R. Tolkien pretty blatantly says this is not allegorical. I didn't intend this to be Christian, but J.R.R. Tolkien later on does admit that, he is a devout Catholic, and that definitely comes through in his writing style, whether he intended it or not. So we can see those kind of pictures. They're not as allegorical, so they're not as precise, but I've actually done an episode. You can go back and watch it. One of my older episodes, it talks about Christ figures that you can find in the Lord of the Rings, and who in the Lord of the Rings kind of fits that a part of who Christ is. Like I said, we don't have an Aslan character that is blatantly a Christ figure, but we have different characters who take on certain aspects of who Christ is throughout the books, and that's something you can go back and check out. There are clearly some biblical ideas there, whether J.R.R. Tolkien intended them or not. And now I think there's a lot of books and movies that you can pull out Christian ideas simply because it's a good versus evil, whether or not anyone in the film had intended that or not. Now there's a different kind of movie, something like Signs. Now, this is not a blatantly Christian movie. It was never intended to be a Christian movie, and I don't believe M. Night Shyamalan considers himself a believer. It did have Mel Gibson in the movie, and Mel Gibson is a believer. But this is a movie basically about an alien invasion. But in the end, we see Mel Gibson's character regain his faith. So he has this redemption arc. You know, he's kind of lost his faith. He's disillusioned, but in the end, he regains his faith in God. Now, that is a blatant Christian theme in a movie that is not intended to be a Christian movie. And I think those can be super effective if they're done well and if the characters are treated properly. And I think that's an important thing. Anytime we're dealing with a movie that deals with faith topics, but deals with the characters in a way that isn't appropriate or doesn't work well, then we don't see those faith threads weaved in and out. I think it can be done, and I think Signs is a movie where it was done pretty well. Whether it was intended or not, I think it works. Like I said, some films have very, very explicit Christian themes. Others simply have Christian ideas or faith themes weaved in and out of them. Now, another option here is, what makes a Christian film? Is it the target audience? Was the film intended to be evangelical, evangelistic, meaning did the producers make this movie hoping that unbelievers would see it and become believers? Was the goal to convince people to believe? And that's where I would call a movie evangelistic, and God's Not Dead kind of fits into that category a little bit, because that is one of the goals, I think, of that movie. Is it simply entertainment for believers? Now, I think God's Not Dead also fits into this. I think I Can Only Imagine is probably a better fit for that. A movie that it's really designed to be entertainment aimed at a believing audience. I think that's a fine thing to do. Some people were like, if it's just entertainment aimed at believers and it doesn't have that evangelistic part in it, then it's not any use. But I would go, if you and I are nerds and we watch Star Trek for fun, why can't we have a good, entertaining movie with big faith elements all through it? If it's well done, why can't we have that as entertainment for believers? I think it's possible. I think it can be done. I think it is done on occasion, but I don't think it's always done. And I think it's done rarely well. And that's, I think, a big problem. Now, I'm not going to go into all of the why some movies are horrible, even though they're supposed to be Christian movies, or why a lot of Christian movies are bad. That is storytelling, and we will get into some storytelling here in just a minute. But, that is just a nature of the beast. You have to be able to tell a good story first. And that has to be number one. If the story wasn't good, it's not going to make a good media. That's all there is to it. Now, the other part of that target audience I was just talking about is the saleability and the marketability. When companies are looking at whether to greenlight a film, they're going to look and say, does this have a built-in audience? Now, why do I say that? This is why, number one, you see a lot of books become movies because the book already sold well, so there is a built-in audience that is expected to go see the movie. This would be things like, this is why Hunger Games became a movie. This is why Divergent became a movie, because the books had a huge following, so it was a no-brainer for the studio to write a big fat check and make a movie. Now, so in the Christian vein, we have to look at that as well. Who is the audience? Who is the group of Christians we can market to and provide this for and sell this media to? If there's not an audience for it, then it's probably not going to get greenlit unless it's somebody's just passion project and they are putting all the money into it. That does happen, and some of those movies are amazing. Some of them aren't. And but just know, saleability and marketability, that is a huge part of why there weren't any Christian movies for a long, long time. Personally, I came from a church background. Now, my family was not like this, but I came from a church background where going to the movies it wasn't completely taboo, but it was kind of looked down upon. It was not recommended. My family didn't buy into that, but that was a part of but that was a part of the church background I had. And there were lots of churches like that. Because of that theory, that idea that church people didn't go to the movies, that meant movies for church people weren't getting made. If church people went to the movies on a regular basis, then there would be more movies made for church people because there would already be a market for it. Somebody in Hollywood would know they could make money and they would greenlight lots and lots of films and write big fat checks. Now, that is starting to happen now, and we're starting to see a lot bigger budgets. And a lot of people will go, well, a big budget doesn't mean it's a good movie. You're right. I've seen some $200 million stinkers. It happens. Once again, you've got to have a good script. You've got to have good acting, and you have to have it well produced. Those are the three things that are going to make for a good movie. Now, when I say more money helps, well, more money means you can spend more pre-production time making sure the script really is good. You can spend more money on individual actors that are going to do better in the film. Then you have production. And if you've got a phenomenal story and a decent production, you can probably make money. But if you can do an amazing production and have an amazing script and have an amazing cast, you could have a winner. And that's kind of how all of that works. Whether you like it that way or not, that is the way this works. Now, another thing about that built-in audience. This is why it often feels like the same movies get made over and over again, and why movies get rebooted again and again and again, because they have a built-in audience. If people paid to see the first one, they'll probably pay to see the second one. Why do you think there is a Fast and Furious 9? Because people go and see them. So whether it's a secular movie or a Christian movie, if the formula works, they're going to keep it. If we keep going back to see it, they're going to make more of it. So be aware, if you think there are horrible movies that should never be made, don't go see them. Because there will be less of them. If they make money, there will be more of them. Once again, this is why we have Fast and Furious 9. Now, another thing that happens in a lot of movies, as far as faith goes, is we simply see faith depicted in a mainstream movie. This is a lot of times just a passing character or a moment in the film, or even if it is a major character, we'll have this character who is kind of stereotypically Christian in some way. Now, a lot of mainstream movies, this will be someone who is Catholic. And I've always wondered why. And I actually had a long conversation with Kenneth Moorfield. Kenneth Moorfield is professor of English at Campbell University, North Carolina. He is also a film critic and a believer. And I had a conversation with him about this and a couple of things that I had thought, and he kind of confirmed them for me. He said that Catholicism, it simply has more periods of art history, a longer history of art. Another thing is Catholicism has easier markers or imagery, things that are readily viewed by anybody. They see it and they go, oh, he's Christian, he's Catholic, simply because they see it, either the priestly collar or the confessional booth or, a crucifix or a rosary. Those are iconic things that even non-believers will see and go, oh, they're Christian. And right or wrong, that is what a lot of mainstream movies will do. Now, it's harder to choose a specific Protestant style, in my opinion, because there's such a big difference between something like, a mega church in California or even a mega church here in Oklahoma. One of the biggest churches in the United States is actually based here in Oklahoma City. But there's a big difference between the look of, say, a mega church and, a small fundamentalist church in rural Arkansas. It's hard to get that, generic Protestantism, without getting a caricature of one or the other. And depending on what you do there, it may be hard to know they are a believer just by sight, in a traditional mainstream movie. And that's a lot of the reason we see Catholics portrayed in mainstream movies, simply because it's easy to see it. Now, one exception to this, and I'm a big fan, you may or may not be a big fan, I really enjoy Tyler Perry's work. He's done a nice job of depicting the African American church in his movies. Some people say it's too much of a campy caricature, and in some movies, I would say it is. In other movies, I think it's well done. In his more serious movies, I think it is more well done. Some of his movies are absolutely straight comedies. Those are not the movies I'm talking about here. He does manage to depict a Southern African American congregation, and it feels appropriate on the screen, and it doesn't feel out of character. It doesn't feel like he's shoehorned it in. It feels like it's simply part of the show. One of his big characters is Medea, and you probably are familiar with this character. And he says it's based on, his mother and his aunt, and it's 6'5", all of Tyler Perry shoved in a dress with a bunch of extra padding, and he had this to say. He said, what I found in plays, and that he did most of these movies were plays first. If you didn't know that, that's something that he has done for a long time. He did plays that he had written and had this character, and he eventually turned these into movies. So he was able to work through these scripts. Once again, good scripts. He was able to work through these scripts through the play process before going to the film. Now, this is what he says. What I found in plays is that this character, as irreverent as she is very disarming. She makes you feel comfortable. So what I've used her as is a tool to get people to laugh and relax so that I can talk about God, talk about faith, mention the name of Jesus in my films. And it works. It serves its purpose very well. I've seen lots of people who don't go to church, who have no concept of God, who have never really thought about it, begin to change their lives because of something that was said in the film or something that the character invited them to see. Now, I think that's a great philosophy. It's a fascinating idea that Tyler Perry said, I'm going to make these films in such a way that it feels natural for these characters to mention God, to mention Jesus, to show up at a church service so that I can get those things into people's lives. And I think he's done a really, really amazing job of making that happen. I do really enjoy his work. Going back to storytelling in general, if you read writing books or scripting books for movies, you're going to run into a couple of different things. You're going to run into this idea that there are only 7 stories. And I don't disagree with that. I've seen other lists where there's a few more, a few less, but overall, there are these general story ideas that get used a lot. And there is a popular book that depicts 7 stories. I think you can find all 7 of these stories in the Bible as well. I don't think these are new things. I think this is simply something that has been weaved in and out of our lives so much that, even in the Bible, it was there in the Bible, and we have just internalized it for all these years. Now, what are these stories I'm talking about? Here are the 7 stories, and here's, I think, a good example from the Bible. One is called Overcoming the Monster, and, this is the, somebody who has to defeat some big monster in their life, whatever that is. David and Goliath is a good example of this kind of movie. Then we have Rags to Riches. This might be Joseph, going from being a nobody in prison in Egypt to becoming the second in charge, only to Pharaoh. It could also be David going from a shepherd to a king. Next is The Quest. Now, this one is a little harder to fit in, but the quest idea could be the Israelites in the desert going to the promised land. Voyage and return. This might be Paul's missionary journeys. It could be a good example. Comedy is one that's a little bit of a stretch, but I think there is some humor in the Bible, and we talked about that last week. If you didn't listen to last week's episode, go check it out. I actually have a comedian on the show, and I shared a passage that I think is humorous, because I think the character, the person speaking, was a little snarky. So go listen to that episode. But comedy, here's one that I think is a little interesting and kind of funny. We've got Gideon. It's like I said, it's a bit of a stretch. Only 300 men managed to destroy the whole army of Midian, basically without fighting them at all. So another one could be Elijah and the priests of Baal, and he basically just straight up mocks them and says, "Hey, maybe your God is in the bathroom." That's pretty funny. Now, that's not a full episode of, comedy, but it is a moment of humor. Then we have tragedy. Tragedy, there's tragedies all through the Bible. One could be the story of David's children. 2 sons, one kills the other for raping a sister. Horrible, horrible stories of what came about because of David's own sin. Then we have, Job could be a possible tragedy. Basically, the loss of everything, including his own health. Then we have rebirth, and that's the final of the 7. And rebirth it's obviously, this is a resurrection story. So we have the story of Jesus dying on a cross and returning triumphant, and going to return again. So, so all 7 of these, there's only 7 stories, are definitely in the Bible. Now, another thing about storytelling, and if you've ever read about storytelling or writing at all, you've probably heard about the story of the hero's journey. Now, the hero's journey is also very popular in nerd circles because George Lucas says that the original Star Wars A New Hope is definitely wrapped up in the hero's journey, and it's pretty easy to see all of the different steps along the circle of the hero's journey within the Star Wars A New Hope movie. And a lot of movies are driven by this idea of the hero's journey. So if you're not familiar with the hero's journey, I'll go through it really quick for you. And then I'll show you an example in the Bible that I think is a pretty good fit. First, you have the ordinary world. This is, you've got just the guy. He's just the guy. He's just there. This would be, Luke Skywalker, and he's just a farm boy. Nothing special. Then we have the call to adventure. Call to adventure, this could be, or sometimes it's called the problem. But basically something happens that gives him something else. There's something more out there, but he's not sure about all of it. So call to adventure in the Star Wars A New Hope, we have, the droids, and the droids tell the story. And then we've got the Princess Leia, and, there's more out there. Then we have the refusal of the call, and this is kind of the, I can't do that. I'm stuck here. I can't do those kind of things. In A New Hope, Luke basically says, I can't do all that. Then we have meeting the mentor. Meeting the mentor is a pivotal point in the hero's journey. And for Star Wars fans, this is going to be meeting Obi-Wan Kenobi. Then we have crossing the threshold. This is the point where he has pushed past the idea of, I can't do this, into, I have to do something. And in A New Hope, this is Aunt Beru and Uncle Owen have died. There's nothing left for me here. I'm going to go with you. That's crossing the threshold. Then we have the tests and the allies and the enemies. This is where we introduce all the other characters. So in Star Wars, we meet Han Solo, we meet Chewbacca, we find out that the Empire is a thing and that they're bad, and, that they're after you, and, all those different things. This is the bulk of the movie. Then we've got the approach and ordeal. In A New Hope, this is kind of we have escaped the Death Star, we turned off the tractor beam and we made it. They arrive and, everything's good. This is in the hero's journey. This is called the reward. But then we have the road back, and this is kind of the climax. This is the last moment. And this is, this is the destroying the Death Star. This is the Star Wars trench run in an X-Wing. And then we have the return. And this is, where you've blown up the Death Star. We arrive at the end of the movie. We hand out all the medals, and we find out everybody is happy and good. So that's the hero's journey. Now, I said I've got a Bible story that I think fits really, really well. And it's Moses. So let me run through it really quick for you. We have the ordinary world. We've got Moses. He's just living his life. He is a Hebrew, but he's living as an Egyptian, but he's just living his Egyptian life. Then we have the call to adventure, or the problem. And this is where he sees his people being maltreated, and he kills an Egyptian. So his call to adventure, he's killed an Egyptian. He's made the first step to freeing his people. And he's already taken that first step. He refuses the call because he runs away, rather than right then and there taking a stand and trying to free his people. He runs away to the wilderness. This is where he meets his future father-in-law and gets married, all of those parts of the story. Then we have meeting the mentor. Now, this one's a little bit different because basically he's meeting God. This is the burning bush moment for Moses. This is how I see this story fitting into the hero's journey. So we've got the burning bush. We have God saying, I'm going to be with you. I'm going to help you along the way. Then we have crossing the threshold. Now, Moses is trying to convince God that you've got the wrong guy. Moses in Exodus 3:11 says, but Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? He finally says yes, and he returns to Egypt. Now, we've got tests and allies and enemies. Now, this is the next step in the hero's journey. And we've got allies. We have Aaron. Aaron joins Moses as his mouthpiece. And then we have Pharaoh, who's obviously the bad guy in this story, and he makes them work harder. Things get harder for the Hebrews because Moses has asked if they can go a 3 days journey out and sacrifice. Even the people are opposed to Moses at this point. Exodus 6:6-9 says, say therefore to the people of Israel, I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. I will deliver you from slavery to them, and I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with great acts of judgment. I will take you to be my people, and I will be your God, and you shall know that I am the Lord your God, who has brought you out from under the burden of the Egyptians. I will bring you to the land that I swore to give to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. I will give it to you for a possession. I am the Lord. Moses spoke thus to the people of Israel, but they did not listen to Moses because of their broken spirit and harsh slavery. So even the people are kind of antagonistic against Moses at this point. Now, we have the approach and ordeal. Now, this is where the bulk of the story comes for Moses and the children of Israel. This is where we get into, we start seeing the plagues. We start seeing Pharaoh, saying yes, then no, and openly refusing to let the people go. This is all Exodus chapter 7 through chapter 12. Then we finally see the reward. The people are allowed to leave. But then we have this road back. That's the next part of the hero's journey. This is often a chase scene in most movies. And in this instance, we do have a chase scene. We have Pharaoh basically changes his mind after he's allowed the people to leave, and a chase ensues, and we have the obstacle of the Red Sea. And we have the Red Sea crossing, and then we have the final, what's called the return. And this is where we have the final freedom, where Moses and the children of Israel are on the other side of the Red Sea, and we see Pharaoh's army fail. But you and I know that story doesn't stop right there. But that is a complete hero's journey just in the story of Moses. Now, I hope you can see that there is great power in storytelling. The Bible is full of meaningful stories. And I believe every story in the Bible does one thing. I think every story in the Bible points directly to Jesus in some way. And I hope that you will use storytelling in your life to lead others to Christ. Well, that's all I have for us today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, click, do all the button things down there, wherever they are. Just do all that. And you can find all of our social links, our online store, and links to our YouTube channel at ChristianNerdsUnite.com. And while you're there, check out our support tab. We'd love to have you as a Patreon. Before we go, I do want to leave you with this scripture. John 16:25. I have said these things to you in figures of speech. The hour is coming when I will no longer speak to you in figures of speech, but will tell you plainly about the Father. In John 16:33, I have said these things to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but take heart, I have overcome the world. We'll see you next week. Blessings.